Welcome to this video that I'm calling Corrective Deadlifting. So many of you have seen videos where I'm coaching someone else on the deadlift while using one of these dowel rods. So you might ask yourself, Elliot, what the hell is that dowel rod all about? And why are you asking this person to deadlift in this particular way? Especially if you know that deadlifting is one of those exercises where if you are a power lifter or you're a strength athlete of any sort, you're probably going to break form. Why is it that Elliot's being so conservative by having you hold your posture or neutral spine with this stick? So the purpose of this video is there's a number of things. Number one, it's to wrap up the three-part series that I created several years ago outlining the biomechanics of the deadlift. I called it the science of deadlifting. Another reason why I made this video is to explain why I use a dowel rod and the critical importance of corrective deadlifting. And finally, to show you exactly how to use it for yourself or with your training partner. Now there are two things that I'm looking for with regard to corrective deadlifting, and there are two things that I'd like to see my client be able to perform. Number one, it's a neutral spine, and that's where this comes in at first. The second thing that I want to work on is the force coupling, meaning how the muscles work together, the flexors and extensors of the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spine. The reason why it's important to include the neutral spine and the force coupling of the flexors and extensors of all areas of your spine is because it's not good enough just to have a rigid, strong spine. You've got to have a flexible, functional spine. And the reason why we deadlift in this fashion is to correct muscular imbalances that are associated with poor performance, but also to increase your performance so that you can be a stronger, faster, more explosive athlete, if you will. And finally, with regard to posture, you just look a hell of a lot better when you've got strong, solid, straight posture. Now, with regard to posture, there are three areas or layers of strength that I often talk about that are deeply affected by your posture or lack thereof. First, obviously, is neuromuscularly. So that basically means how the nervous system and the muscular system work together to create proper biomechanics, joint alignment, and, like I described earlier, force coupling. That means do the muscles work together? Do the muscles in the front of the body and the back of the body work synergistically to increase performance? The second factor we have to consider is the physiological strength of the individual with regard to their posture. Among many other things, someone who has poor posture has poor breathing capacity or breathing mechanics. Someone who has a thoracic kyphosis or hyperlordosis has an inability to breathe deeply. An inability to breathe deeply will lend itself to sympathetic overload or an imbalance in your autonomic nervous system. This could lead to all sorts of digestive, sexual, and neuromuscular problems. Finally, we have to consider the energetic and psychological implications of someone with good or poor posture. An individual who walks around with tall, erect posture is generally going to feel better about themselves. In exercise, we like to say form equals function. Well, psychologically, it's very much the same. Someone who stands tall or feels good about themselves. Someone who's slumped over and depressing their ability to breathe or depressing their posture will generally feel sad and depressed about themselves. This is not always the case, but it's a generalization. Now, what's the good of having strong posture if there's no performance? What we've got to consider is the force coupling, or the way the muscles work together in a balanced fashion of the neck, the thoracic spine, and the lumbar spine, coupled with the mobility of the hips, or segmental mobility of the pelvis. In the upper body, or the cervical spine, we've got to consider that the deep cervical flexors and the extensors of the cervical spine have to be balanced. The typical imbalance is such that the deep cervical flexors are weak and the cervical extensors, including the sternocleidomastoid, are overdeveloped and create a forward head posture. So if you have a thoracic kyphosis or a hyperlordosis, you're generally going to have a forward head posture. So we've got to work the balance of the musculature in the neck, and that's what the deadlift helps us do. Also, we have to consider the implications of the thoracic spine. Someone who's using a corrective deadlift form has to have very loose, the front part of their muscles have to be very loose. The front part of the shoulders, including the pec minor and the bicep, have to be loose enough to allow full thoracic extension. It's also going to have to be coupled with strong scapular adduction. So all the muscles in the back of the body need to be strong enough to pin the shoulder blades down and together. And also the muscles in the front of the body have to be relaxed enough to allow that to happen. So stretching and strengthening has to happen in multiple areas of the spine. And finally, the lumbopelvic region has to be considered. So there are two typical postural dysfunctions in the lumbopelvic region that I've described in other videos. One would be classified as a pink panther and the other a Donald Duck. A pink panther is someone who has really tight upper hamstrings, tight abdominals, loose hip flexors, and weak low back that causes their butt to sort of tuck under and have a long, swooping C-type posture. The other postural distortion is the Donald Duck, where the individual has really tight hip flexors, really weak abdominals, and really loose hamstrings, coupled also with really tight low back. So you can see that there needs to be a stretching and a strengthening of multiple muscles throughout the cervical, thoracic, and lumbopelvic region. Now make no mistake, the corrective deadlift is not the same type of deadlift that you're gonna use if you're a competitive powerlifter. But as we are all looking to increase the strength of our core being, becoming the strongest version of ourselves, you can see how the corrective deadlift will support you in your psychological, physiological, and neuromuscular strength. And that is why I believe the corrective deadlift is the quintessential exercise for becoming a stronger version of yourself. All right, now in this section of the video, I'm gonna take my buddy Danny, who's been doing a lot of the video editing for my channel, who's never deadlifted before. And I'm gonna show him exactly how to deadlift using the corrective form of deadlifting. The reason why this is critical is because if he's never deadlifted before, then he doesn't have all the bad habits, and we can get him straight right from the beginning. This is how we take it. So Danny, approach the bar. What I like Danny to do first, and what I'd like you to do first, is to grab the bar with your palms up, get close to it, and just stand straight up. So I'm not gonna coach you, I'm just gonna ask you to lift it up. Just lift it up. Cool. Now, obviously that's horrible. That's not the way he's gonna continue doing it, but I just wanna get him to start from the top, because starting from the top, the eccentric portion of the movement has got a lot more strength, so we can correct better from the top down. Good, bring your feet closer so they're about shoulder width apart. Good, bring your hands closer also so that you're just dropping here, cool. Now the reason why I have him starting with the supinated grip is because it's coupled with thoracic extension. First, I want him to see what it feels like to have thoracic extension before we go into an overhand grip. That way, when he does go into a normal overhand grip, it's a lot easier to get that feeling of thoracic extension again. And that's usually the area where most people mess up. Now, as I take this stick and I put it on his spine, I'm dropping it right down between his butt crack and right between his shoulder blades. What I want Danny to do, what I want you to do is put your head on the stick. Cool. Now, the very first thing is you're gonna see that this stick touches him in 3 spots: the head, the middle of the back, and his butt. And there's a certain amount of curvature that's allowed between each one of those bumps. Cool. Now, one of the very first things that I see Danny doing incorrectly, even as he's standing, is he's very hiked up with his shoulders and rotating forward. So even though he's got the supinated grip, he still has a tendency to rotate forward. Without doing any corrective stretching, I'm gonna ask him to bring my fingers together. Good. Now you see what I did there? Basically all I did was I put my fingers right down below his shoulder blades, and I'm asking him to bring my fingers together. That's a really good cue to have someone drop their shoulder blades down and bring them together. Now, here's the cue that I use to get him to bend properly. Imagine that you have a hinge right here, right? Just a circular hinge. I want you to tip forward to that hinge and keep tipping until I tell you stop. Good. Tip, 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 stop. Good. Get it so that the stick is touching you again in 3 spots. So drop your chin, bring my fingers together, stick your ass out. Yeah, there you go. Down here, bring them down here. Good. Good. Now, if the bar is slightly over your knees, I want you to sink your whole body, your hips and everything down to the ground. Sink, 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 sink. Good. Now, you'll see that Danny did a pretty good job leaning forward. What I'd like him to be able to do is to maintain that 3 position touch without losing any of those craters that I was able to put my hands through before. So you see now I can't get my hand through here. Good. Lift it up however you want. Good. Danny's actually pretty good. So again, we're never going to get it right at first, but we're going to take our time. With each repetition, we're going to correct one thing. So that last repetition was sort of an overview. This repetition, I'm going to give him a new cue. Bring my fingers together. Good. Down and together. Right down here. So try not to shrug. Keep your shoulders away from your ears as far as you can. Good. Now, Danny, you feel how I can get my hand through here? I should always be able to get just a little bit of my fingers through there while you go down, while you make your way down in the deadlift, okay? Good. Also, make sure you're always touching here, here, and here. Bend your knees slightly, about 20 degrees. Good. Tuck your chin. Good. Now start tipping forward at the hinge. Tip, 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 tip. Good. Tuck your chin, tuck your chin, tuck your chin. Good. Tucking the chin is a cue that gets it back into alignment. Now, don't let my fingers tickle you. Start sinking your body, but don't let my fingers tickle you. Good. Tuck your chin. Good. Not bad. I know he's getting tired too. Well, you see what happens is he gets to a certain point where, and especially that second rep, everything just sort of collapses over, right? So we know that at the bottom portion of the deadlift, there's a lack of flexibility and lack of strength. So instead of having him continue deadlift with the breaking of the form down at the bottom, what I'd rather do is build the deadlift up off the ground just a little bit so that he knows what it feels like to hit the ground without losing form. All right, so you see how I've built up the bar from off the ground just a little bit. Again, this is going to give him an opportunity to maintain that neutral spine and work on the force coupling, namely within the lumbopelvic region as we approach the bottom of the deadlift. Now before we continue, this is no more than like 95 pounds. And Danny's been working out for a few months now. He's not in bad shape at all, but he'll tell you that this is very challenging because it requires so much focus, concentration, and nervous system activation that even with a light weight, you're going to be humbled by this form of exercise. So if you've been deadlifting for many years and you know you can do a 500-pound deadlift, you will literally have to humble yourself down to a 185-pound deadlift in order to receive the benefits of the corrective exercise that I'm describing with. Now, again, I'd rather Danny start from the top of the movement than the bottom because there's more strength in that eccentric portion of the movement. Good, go ahead and pick it up. Not so interested in how he picks it up, just get closer to the bar. Good, pick it up however you want. Cool, and we work our way down. Cool, everything's touching. Good, shoulder blades are down and together, shoulders aren't too high. Bend your knees 20 degrees. Good, I should just be able to get the width of my hand through here. Good, and begin tipping forward. Tip, 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 tip. Over, 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 over. Keep your hips up higher. Over, 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 over. Good, now start sinking. Boom, get your butt up just a little bit higher. Cool, tuck your chin. Boom, so now you can see, here I can get my hand in there a little bit better than before. Before I couldn't get it in at all. Here I can get my fingers, and he even has a little bit of mobility that allows him to create a little bit more with a lumbar lordosis. I feel that strength in there. Cool, now, I'm gonna ask Danny to see if he can maintain this neutral spine, unshrug his shoulder, as he lifts straight up off the ground by pushing the earth away. Good, stand up. Good, and stand all the way tall. Boom. Good, we'll go down one more time. Good, bend your knees slightly. Good, tip. Keep your hips up. Tip, 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 tip. Good, now sink everything down. Tuck your chin, tuck your chin, tuck your chin. Boom, good. So as you can see, it's a very technical and intensive movement, this corrective type of deadlifting, and it definitely isn't for everyone. If you are looking to build up your strength on a physiological, physical, and energetic level, becoming a stronger version of yourself in all realms, I would invite you to humble yourself at least once a year back to a lower weighted deadlift, work with a partner, and get your corrective deadlift straight.